In the previous set of videos, we set up a HTTP server and responded to client requests. In this series of videos, we will look at how the HTTP package allows us to make requests as clients to other servers, typically referred to as third-party APIs or web services. Web services are server applications designed to communicate with other software. This can involve looking up data associated with some search term or the creation of brand new data given some parameters. For the first demo, we will look at the GitHub Jobs API, a public API without any form of authentication. Most APIs require some form of authentication that identifies the application. This is because a fully public API opens itself to abuse, as the bandwidth required to service each request is paid for solely by the API provider. This makes them quite susceptible to denial of service attacks. With APIs that require authentication, resource usage can be monitored, and applications that consume too much of it in a given window can be rate limited or banned entirely. API endpoints are dedicated URLs to which application can send requests to. These typically include an HTTP method and a URL. The HTTP method is a verb like get or post, which describes how the resource can be interacted with. Requests that retrieve a resource are typically serviced using the HTTP GET method. Requests that create or change a resource are typically serviced using the HTTP POST method. There are other HTTP methods like put, delete, and patch as well. Their usage is dependent on how the designer of the API wants applications to interact with it. Depending on the architecture style of the API, the same URL can be serviced using different HTTP methods. For example, in a fictional library API, the URL /book might be serviced by the GET request to retrieve a particular book, a POST request to create a new book, a PUT request to replace an existing book, a delete request to remove a book, and a patch request to update a few pages within a book. The GitHub Jobs API has two endpoints, /positions.json and /positions/id.json, both serviced by the GET method. This makes the GitHub Jobs API a read-only one, which makes sense for public APIs which anyone on the internet can interact with. Our application makes use of only the first endpoints. Positions.json. Our application makes use of only the first endpoints, get positions.json, which returns back a list of jobs filtered by user-specified parameters, including description, location, latitude, longitude, and full-time. Our application will make use of only the first two parameters, description and location. In general, these parameters are typically supplied as part of a query string, which takes on the format ? followed by name equals value pairs, which are separated by ampersands. In this example, the query string is ? which signals that there is data, description equals Python, which is the first name value pair, ampersand, signaling that there is more data, and location equals new plus York. Space characters can be represented as pluses. This is the same format that is automatically generated by a browser when submitting a form. Node.js provides us a query string library, which contains two methods, queryString.parse and queryString.stringify, to convert from a query string into an object and the reverse. QueryString.parse is also used in the URL.parse method when supplied true as its second parameter. The return type of this API is of type JSON, spelled JSON. JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation, is a data interchange format widely used on the web. The JavaScript language provides two methods, JSON.parse and JSON.stringify, to convert a JSON string into an object and an object into a JSON string. Most browsers contain tools to make the JSON more readable, but the actual transmitted format that is served is usually sent as compact as possible to minimize bandwidth and download times. Our application builds on top of this API, asking the user for a description and location. It then uses that data to generate a request to the GitHub Jobs API. It then takes that JSON response and displays it to the user in a more user-friendly way. Let's look at the code. First, we see that our server handles 3 endpoints. The root of our site, which when requested pipes the contents of index.html. This file contains an HTML form where the user can submit a description and location, and that information is sent to the search endpoint. The search endpoint captures submitted data. We use the URL.parse method, which when supplied true as its second parameter, applies the queryString.parse method to its query property. We can then extract the description and location from the results. Then we call the function getJobInformation, which has the task of contacting the GitHub Jobs API. Finally, our last endpoint is a catch-all endpoint that serves a 404 not found to any other requests. Notice our function passes along not just the user input, description, and location, but also the res object, which is the only way we can respond to the client. Until we are ready to respond to the clients, we must pass this variable forward from function to function using a technique called continuation passing. In this example, request handler creates the variable res, which gets passed to the function getJobsInformation, which then passes it to the function serveResults, where it finally gets used in a call to res.writeHead and res.end. The getJobInformation function queries the domain jobs.github.com. In this example, we supply it 3 parameters. The URL to be queried is the first parameter. The second parameter defines any options, the most common of which are method and headers. Method defaults to get, and because this is a public API, authorization headers aren't required. So in fact, this second parameter for this example is not required, as all the default settings are enough. But I included it here so I could talk a bit about it, and in later examples, this header variable is crucial. The third parameter is the callback function, which upon receiving a response provides a stream resource to retrieve it one chunk at a time. The job of the end method is to take an HTTP request object, send it, and signal that this is the end of the request. There also exists an http.write method that does not do this last step of signaling. It is used if you want to send something partially, which we'll see in the third example. The process stream function downloads the entire stream and saves it as a string, and then forwards the results to a function serveResults. The serveResults function takes the received data, applies JSON.parse to it, which converts it into an object jobs. Looking at the sample data on the GitHub Jobs site, this data is structured as an array of objects with various properties, notably title, description, and URL. The code loops through each job using the map function and extracts out 3 properties: title, description, and URL. Using those 3 values, it creates multiple HTML snippets. It then combines each of those snippets using the join method, and then appends a heading on top of the results before sending it to the client as HTML. Let's see this in action. We will search for Python in New York. And so there are 3 jobs, and if we click on these links, they will take us to the actual job page. In the next demo, we will look at a similar API, usajobs.gov, that also provides job information. So a lot of the existing code can be reused. but this API requires authentication.